Would you break this game down if you ran this show? If this were late kick with fill in the blank, would you break this game down? Georgia favored by 14.5 at Auburn. At least that's what the line was when we made the graphic earlier. It still is. I look over at the monitor there. This is the Saturday 3:30 Eastern game on CBS. Funny thing at Auburn, so Auburn's in Lee County, Alabama. Allegedly, all of Alabama is on Central Time. But Auburn is on Central Time. Phoenix City, Alabama, which is closer to the Georgia line, it's right on the Chattahoochee River, they go on Eastern Time. And so somewhere, no one really quite knows where the line is in Lee County, but somewhere as you're driving out 280, you cross into Central Time. And the phones can make no sense of it. The iJosh gets thoroughly confused because it thinks when you cross the river, it's supposed to go to Central Time. And then you go over and McDonald's is still not open, and you say, you guys are supposed to be open. No, buddy, got to wait an hour. So no one really knows how that works. But it is a 3:30 Eastern kickoff. That's what we do know. It's an interesting little dynamic here, combination of dynamics going on. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Georgia has been crowned in a lot of corners of the country this week as the best team in the country. We will show you the JP poll tonight and see if we agree. So you got that going for you if you're Auburn. And then number two, Georgia, it is true, will take it on the road in a truly hostile environment for the first and maybe the only time this year. Because pray for Vanderbilt as we do. We're not counting Commodore Stadium where it was Georgia fans 2-to-1 ratio to Vandy fans. So yes, all that in the classical sense does figure to make things hard on Georgia. So here's what I want us to do. I want us to be kind and courteous, and let's try, for the sake of all of our Auburn fans, to find a path to the upset. Okay, we have agreed. Okay, so yes, it's true. The road factor could come into play here. Georgia has not faced anything like this year. I tend to believe it will be a factor, but I tend to believe you still have to have the kind of team to make it a factor. It's like when Penn State played Auburn. Yeah, Penn State had the home environment. They didn't sit around and wait for the crowd to beat Auburn. They went on the offensive and ended up beating Auburn. Can Auburn do that? Going on the offensive against Georgia, it's a lot easier said in a nice, comfortable studio than it is on a football field. I really wonder, does Auburn have the ability, just as a team, do they have the ability to get Georgia in any kind of pressure situation? Georgia didn't have to sweat against Arkansas. Georgia obviously didn't have to sweat against Vanderbilt. And really, in retrospect, we may not have known it fully at the time, Georgia didn't have to sweat against Clemson, even though it ended up being a one-possession game. And Clemson wasn't going to score if they played till Wednesday, again, as it turns out. And so I wonder if Auburn can make Georgia or force Georgia to try and be aggressive. And then the second part of that is, I wonder if Todd Monken would be foolish enough to put Stetson Bennett in that position. Because this is, kind of like the Penn State versus Iowa approach. If you're Georgia, punting's not the worst thing in the world. Throwing the ball away is not the worst thing in the world. Because you get the luxury of watching your defense go on the field and knowing I'd be shocked if they move the ball against them. Now, in reality, it's not always going to look statistically like it has so far for Georgia's defense, but, how's Auburn going to find 20 offensive points here? I'll just put it to you that way. There are other ways to score in this game. We all know that. Does Auburn find 20 offensive points? If so, that would be running it up on Georgia's defense based on what we've seen so far this year. But they got to win first downs to even have a shot at that. If you get predictable on third down, have you watched Georgia? It's terrible. It's terrifying. And the parents of those players are in the stands watching you do that to their kids. That's the worst part about it. It's a decently favorable matchup in one way for Auburn. And that is, Auburn held LSU, I think, they held them under 30 yards rushing. They held Penn State under 100 yards total rushing. Georgia's running game has gotten on track as of late, but it's been by choice. So if Auburn is able to limit them, running the ball a little bit, and at the very least, if it's Stetson Bennett, which we assume it will be at quarterback, if they just make Stetson Bennett have to throw the ball to beat him, and Todd Monken feels like we do want to press the issue a little bit, every time Georgia's putting the ball in the air, yes, theoretically, better things can probably happen for you in that chain of events than if you're on offense. That's how much I respect Georgia's defense right now. But, yeah, I don't know if they can get in that situation. That's the reason I'm spelling it out so basic there. I don't think they can get in that situation enough. But crazier things have happened. Maybe a special teams play, defensive play early for Auburn. It's 13-0 all of a sudden, and, they've got 26 yards total offense. That would be the kind of rare but possible fast start they would need. But I really wonder if it's just played straight up, I don't know where they find 20 offensive points. And the other thing to think about, and this is really where it goes sideways for Auburn, I think, is the advantage you had last week where LSU was spent by the fourth quarter, that could be Georgia's advantage this week. Because even though on the surface you both played high-profile matchups last week, Georgia never had to sweat. I mean, some of their key players barely on the field, double-digit snaps. They didn't have to sweat. You did. I mean, you played late into the night again, and you played in a hostile environment, and you got the win this time, but you had to fight to do it. And so you got to ask yourself, this has been a tough season now. Even against Georgia State, you guys had to fight, and so you keep having to empty the tank. And this is not a team that you can afford to play with anything less than a full tank for 4 quarters against. So, Jesse, we tried. Let's take a look at the model, and let's see what the model thinks. I got to tell you, if I was an Auburn fan, I'd be a little bit encouraged by what the model says. So the Vegas line right now is Georgia minus 14.5. That's what our model says, too. I just got to be honest with you. There are going to be few times this year where Georgia feels truly threatened. They weren't last week. Maybe Kirby Smart convinced them they should have been, so you see what the result was. But he gets to take them on the road this week. He called Bo Nix elite in his press conference, and so I think we all know what that's about. But he gets to convince his team, he being Kirby Smart, that they're actually in some danger this week, that this could be a treacherous spot for them. I expect nothing less than the best from Georgia this week, Stetson Bennett or JT Daniels. I don't really care. I don't think Auburn's got the bullets. I really don't. And so anything less than 14-plus non-offensive points, I think leads to not only a Georgia win, but I really think when we get into the second half, I think they're going to be able to name the score. So I think they're going to run it up a little bit. I think Georgia's going to win. I think Georgia's going to cover, and we'll probably hear a lot more of the same coming out of that. If that is the way it goes, you'll hear a lot more of, boy, Georgia looks invincible. I probably won't think any more of Georgia after this game than I do right now. Now, if they struggle, that things could change, but I think that it's kind of like we were talking about with Penn State, Iowa. Georgia's got that really thick layer of ice, and until you swing a sledgehammer that's heavy enough to crack that ice, you're going to be embarrassed against them. And really, there's one team in this conference that can probably do it. There may not be another one in America, but if there is, there's going to be 1 or 2 max who could do it. I just don't think their name is Auburn. That's all I'm saying. So I'm going to take Georgia to win. I'm going to take Georgia to cover.